Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this for a second before you answer. When was the last time you had an idea, a really good idea, and you did not say it out loud? Maybe it was in a meeting. Maybe it was in a strategy session. Maybe it was a conversation with leadership where you thought, I know the answer to this, but what if I am wrong? What if they think I do not belong in this conversation? If that hit a nerve, you are in the right place. Welcome back to Rise and Thrive. I am Shay Blackmon, founder and CEO of Shay Blackmon Consulting, a DBA candidate in organizational leadership and someone who has spent over 20 years in HR leadership across manufacturing, automotive, nonprofit, healthcare, quick service, and professional services industries. And I will tell you this from experience. That silence you just felt, that hesitation, that is not wisdom. That is imposter syndrome doing what it does best. It is convincing brilliant women to be quiet. Today is episode 84, and we are diving deep into chapter 4 of my book, Rise and Thrive, A Black Woman's Blueprint for Leadership Excellence. The chapter is called Overcoming Imposter Syndrome and Building Confidence. And the quote that opens this chapter, the one that I want you to carry with you all week, comes from Audre Lorde. I have come to believe over and over again that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal, and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. Read that again in your mind, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. That is the assignment today. We are going to unpack why imposter syndrome hits Black women differently. We are going to name the systems behind it. And then I am going to give you frameworks you can actually use to push past it. Not motivational quotes on a wall, strategy, real talk, tools you can use tomorrow morning. Let us get into it. So let us start with the elephant in the room. Imposter syndrome is not new. It has been studied since the late 1970s. But here's what most of those studies got wrong. They treated it like a personal flaw, like it was something that happened inside you because you lacked confidence. The original research was done on predominantly white populations, and the solutions they offered were things like just believe in yourself or visualize your success. And while those things are fine, they completely ignore the systemic context that makes imposter syndrome so much heavier for Black women. Let me be clear. When a Black woman walks into a corporate boardroom and feels like she does not belong, that is not a delusion. In many cases, the environment itself is telling her she does not belong. The statistics tell that story plainly. Black women hold roughly 4% of C-suite positions in Fortune 500 companies. We hold about 1.6% of VP roles. When you are the only person who looks like you in every room you enter, feeling like an outsider is not irrational. It is the environment reinforcing a message. In Rise and Thrive, I break this down into what I call the systemic intensifiers of imposter syndrome. These are the external forces that amplify those internal doubts. The first is representation scarcity. When you are the only one, every action you take carries extra weight. You are not just presenting a quarterly report, you are presenting a quarterly report as the only Black woman at the table, wondering if your colleagues are evaluating your competence or your presence. The second intensifier is cultural taxation. This is the invisible labor that gets added to your plate because of your identity. You are asked to lead the diversity committee. You are asked to mentor every Black employee who walks through the door. You are expected to weigh in on every racial issue that makes the news. And all of that is on top of the job you are actually hired to do. Now, there is nothing wrong with wanting to do those things, but when it is expected rather than chosen, and when it is uncompensated and unrecognized, it becomes a tax on your energy, your time, and ultimately, your confidence. The third intensifier is what researchers call stereotype threat, the fear of confirming negative stereotypes about your group. Think about it. If you make a mistake in a meeting, you are not just worried about the mistake. You are worried that your mistake becomes evidence in someone's mind that Black women are not cut out for leadership. That additional layer of pressure is exhausting, and it creates a kind of performance anxiety that has nothing to do with your actual capability. And then there is the success penalty. This is the one that really gets under my skin. When Black women succeed, our success is often met with skepticism rather than celebration. Oh, she only got that promotion because of diversity goals. They needed to fill a quota. So even when you win, the narrative shifts to undermine your achievement. You are fighting uphill whether you succeed or struggle. Now, here's why understanding all of this matters. When you realize that your imposter feelings are not personal failings, but reasonable responses to challenging environments, something shifts. You stop asking, "What is wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is wrong with this system, and how do I navigate it strategically?" That reframe is everything. And I want to bring Audre Lorde back into this for a moment. Lorde wrote extensively about the relationship between silence and survival. In her landmark essay, The Transformation of Silence into Language and Action, she argued that remaining silent does not protect us. She said the fear of speaking was not about the speaking itself, but about the visibility that comes with it. And for Black women in corporate spaces, that visibility is complicated by all the intensifiers we just talked about. But Lorde's conclusion was not to retreat further into silence. It was the opposite. She believed that speaking, even imperfectly, even at risk, was a form of self-definition. And self-definition is the antidote to imposter syndrome. Think about that connection. Imposter syndrome tells you that someone else gets to define whether you belong. Lorde says no, you define yourself. You speak your truth, and you let the world adjust. All right, so now that we have named the beast, let us talk about how to fight it. And I want to give you something concrete, not a pep talk, but a framework. In Chapter 4 of Rise and Thrive, I introduce what I call the evidence method, and it is designed to interrupt imposter syndrome at the exact moment it shows up. Here is how it works. The next time self-doubt creeps in, and it will, I want you to stop and do 4 things. First, name the thought. Do not let it float around in the background like ambient noise. Pull it into the light. What exactly is the thought? Is it, "I am not qualified for this role"? Is it, "Everyone here knows more than I do"? Is it, "They are going to find out I do not belong"? Get specific. Write it down if you can. Second, gather contrary evidence. And this is where most people skip a step, because we are great at gathering evidence for our doubts, but terrible at gathering evidence against them. So I want you to ask yourself, what are my qualifications? What problems have I solved? What positive feedback have I received? What challenges have I overcome to get here? You are building a case, and the case is for yourself. You are the attorney and the client. Third, check for cognitive distortions. This comes from cognitive behavioral therapy, and it is powerful. There are common thinking traps that fuel imposter syndrome. All or nothing thinking. I made one mistake, so I am completely incompetent. Mental filtering, focusing only on the one critical comment while ignoring 5 pieces of praise. Discounting the positive. They only promoted me because of diversity goals. When you can name the distortion, you break its power. Fourth, reframe with balance. This is not about toxic positivity. I am not asking you to tell yourself everything is perfect. I am asking you to replace the distorted thought with a balanced one. Instead of, "I do not belong here," try, "I am here because of my skills and contributions, and I am still growing." Instead of, "Everyone knows more than me," try, "I bring a unique perspective that adds value to this team." See the difference? You are not lying to yourself. You are correcting a lie that imposter syndrome told you. Now, here's a practical exercise I want you to try this week. It is called the Thought Record, and I walk through it in the book. Keep a small notebook or open a note on your phone. For 1 week, every time imposter syndrome shows up, write down 4 things: the situation, your automatic thought, the evidence for and against that thought, and a more balanced perspective. By the end of the week, you will start to see patterns. You will notice that the same distortions keep showing up, and once you see the pattern, you can break it. I have used this with leaders across the industries I have served, from manufacturing floors to healthcare systems to professional services firms. And what I consistently see is that the women who do this exercise come back and say, "I cannot believe how much evidence I was ignoring." That is the power of this framework. It does not give you false confidence. It reveals the real confidence that was buried under distorted thinking. Let us take this a step further, because one of the things I talk about in Chapter 4 is the idea of building what I call your success evidence portfolio. This is not just a resume. This is not just a list of accomplishments. This is a living document that serves as your personal antidote to imposter syndrome. Think of it as your confidence vault. And let me walk you through the sections, because I want you to actually build this. Section 1 is your qualifications inventory: degrees, certifications, specialized training, skills you have mastered. Write all of it down. And do not minimize anything. If you completed a training that made you better at your job, it goes on the list. Section 2 is what I call the Achievement Chronicle. For every significant accomplishment, I want you to document the project name, your specific role and contributions, the challenges you overcame, the quantifiable results, and the feedback you received. Get detailed. This is your evidence file. Section 3 is impact documentation. This is where you record the value you have created: problem solved, money saved, revenue generated, processes improved, team members you have developed. This section is gold when it comes time for performance reviews or promotion conversations. But more importantly, it is gold for your own self-perception. Section 4 is the endorsement collection. Save those emails. Screenshot that praise. Document what your mentor said about your potential. Collect LinkedIn recommendations. When imposter syndrome comes knocking, you open this section and let other people's words remind you of what you already know. Section 5 is your growth timeline, where you chart your professional evolution: key milestones, skills developed, expanding responsibilities. When you see your growth mapped over time, it is hard to argue that you do not belong. And Section 6 is the challenge conquered log. This is one of my favorites. Document every obstacle you have overcome, every difficult situation you navigated, every time you were afraid and did it anyway. Because imposter syndrome has a short memory. It will forget every battle you have won, but your log will not. Now, here is the key. This portfolio is not something you build once and forget. You update it monthly. You review it before important meetings. You pull it out during moments of self-doubt. It becomes your shield, and I do not use that word lightly. In the Shield Resilience Strategy Guide that I offer for free, there is a link in the show notes, I talk about building layers of protection against the forces that try to diminish your confidence. Your success evidence portfolio is one of those layers. I want to stay with Audre Lorde for a moment, because her life and work are a masterclass in overcoming imposter syndrome, even though she never used that term herself. Audre Lorde was born in 1934 in New York City to Caribbean immigrant parents. She described herself as a Black, lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, and each of those identities placed her at another intersection of marginalization. She was publishing poetry as early as high school, and yet she spent much of her early career working as a librarian, existing in spaces where her full identity was not welcomed. When she began teaching at Hunter College in the late 1960s, she was one of very few Black women in academia. She faced the same dynamics we have been talking about today: hypervisibility for her differences, invisibility for her contributions, cultural taxation as the go-to person for all things related to race, and the unrelenting pressure to prove she belonged. But here is what made Lorde extraordinary. She did not retreat. She did not shrink. She transformed her experience of exclusion into a philosophy of radical self-expression. Her essay collection, Sister Outsider, is essentially a blueprint for what we are discussing today. She argued that silence was never a form of safety. She wrote that her silence had never protected her, and that remaining quiet only served the systems that wanted her invisible. Now think about how that applies to your professional life. How many times have you stayed silent in a meeting because you were afraid of being judged? How many ideas have you swallowed because you were not sure they would be received well? Lorde would say that silence is the real imposter. It pretends to protect you, but it actually collaborates with the very systems that question your belonging. Lorde also practiced something that we can learn from. She documented. She wrote extensively. She processed her experiences through language. And in doing so, she created her own evidence portfolio, not of corporate achievements, but of intellectual and emotional truth. Her legacy is proof that speaking your truth, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is met with resistance, is the most powerful act of self-definition available to you. And here's the connection to high-value leadership. One of the 5 pillars of my framework is authentic connection. You cannot authentically connect with the people you lead, with the organizations you serve, with the vision you are trying to build if you are hiding behind a mask of silence. Imposter syndrome tells you the mask is keeping you safe. Audre Lorde tells you the mask is keeping you trapped. I am going to side with Audre on this one. Before we wrap up the main content, I want to give you one more practical tool because I promised you strategy, not just inspiration. I call this the confidence reclamation exercise, and it builds directly on what we have been discussing. Here's what I want you to do. Set aside 15 minutes this week uninterrupted. Get a journal, a notebook, whatever works for you, and answer these 4 prompts. Prompt 1. Write down 3 moments in your career where you succeeded despite doubting yourself. Get specific. What was the situation? What were you afraid of? What happened? How did it turn out? Prompt 2. Identify one recurring imposter thought, the one that comes up most often. Now apply the evidence method we discussed earlier. Name it, gather contrary evidence, check for distortions, and reframe it. Prompt 3. Write a letter to yourself from the perspective of someone who believes in you completely. It could be your mentor, your best friend, your grandmother, whoever sees your greatness most clearly. What would they say to you right now? What would they remind you of? Prompt 4. Identify one specific action you have been avoiding because of self-doubt. Maybe it is speaking up in a meeting. Maybe it is applying for that promotion. Maybe it is pitching an idea to leadership. Write it down and commit to doing it within the next 7 days. Now, I know some of you are thinking, that sounds simple. It is simple, but simple is not the same as easy. The act of putting pen to paper, of confronting your doubts with evidence and intention, is profoundly challenging, and it is profoundly effective. In my work across multiple industries and through my own journey as a DBA candidate studying organizational leadership, I have seen over and over that the leaders who grow the fastest are not the ones who never doubt themselves. They are the ones who have a system for processing those doubts and moving forward anyway. That is what competence confidence looks like. It is not the absence of doubt. It is the decision to act in spite of it. Now let me bring this into the current moment because this conversation is not happening in a vacuum. We are in the second quarter of 2026, and the professional landscape for Black women continues to evolve in complicated ways. Organizations across the country are recalibrating their approaches to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some are doubling down on meaningful inclusion, while others are pulling back. And for Black women navigating those shifts, imposter syndrome can intensify. When you see programs being reduced or restructured, when you hear the narrative that merit should stand alone, as though merit has ever been evaluated without bias, it can trigger those old doubts. Was I only valued because of a program? Do I really belong here on my own? And I want to be very direct with you. You do belong. Your value was never contingent on a program, a policy, or an initiative. Your value is contingent on your skills, your perspective, your contributions, and your character. And if anyone tries to tie your worth to anything other than that, they are the ones operating under a distortion, not you. This is also why building your success evidence portfolio matters so much right now. In a shifting landscape, your documentation of impact is your anchor. It does not depend on what anyone else says about the value of diversity. It is rooted in the tangible results you have delivered. Numbers do not have opinions. Outcomes do not have bias. When you can point to the problems you have solved, the teams you have developed, and the revenue you have influenced, you are standing on ground that nobody can pull out from under you. All right, let us bring it home. Today we went deep into Chapter 4 of Rise and Thrive, and here is what I need you to walk away with. First, imposter syndrome is not your fault. It is amplified by systemic factors, representation scarcity, cultural taxation, stereotype threat, and success penalties that have nothing to do with your ability and everything to do with environments that were not designed for you. Second, you have tools. The evidence method gives you a step-by-step framework for interrupting imposter thoughts in real time. Name the thought, gather contrary evidence, check for distortions, reframe with balance. Do it this week. Third, build your success evidence portfolio. Start with whatever section feels most natural: your qualifications inventory, your achievement chronicle, your endorsement collection. Just start and update it regularly. And fourth, remember Audre Lorde's lesson. Silence is not your protector. It is the real imposter. Your voice, your ideas, your perspective, they are not just valuable, they are necessary. If today's episode resonated with you, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment below and tell me, what is one imposter thought you are ready to release? Name it in the comments and let this community hold you accountable. And if you have not grabbed your free copy of the Shield Resilience Strategy Guide, do that today. The link is in the show notes. It is the perfect companion to everything we discussed. You can also grab the full Rise and Thrive book, where all 10 chapters are waiting for you to go deeper. Do not forget, this show, Rise and Thrive, airs every Wednesday, and it is specifically for you, for Black women navigating leadership and professional spaces. If you also want leadership content for all professionals, check out my Unlock, Empower, Transform podcast, which drops every Tuesday and Thursday, rooted in my book, High Value Leadership: Transforming Organizations Through Purposeful Culture. Make sure you subscribe to the Blackmon Brief, my free weekly newsletter. It goes right to your inbox with strategies, insights, and the kind of real talk that you will not find anywhere else. The link is in the show notes. And as always, if you have a question you want me to tackle, drop it in the comments for our Ask Shay series. Your questions fuel this community. Until next Wednesday, I am Shay Blackmon, reminding you that you are not an imposter. You are an innovator, a leader, and a force. Now go out there and speak your truth.